Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern over on Gator 8, a new college football video drops. And now, on with our feature presentation. When you watch a pregame show to a sporting event, what's the next logical thing you expect to follow that pregame show? Duh, you expect a game. And most of the time, this is what happens. You watch the NFL Today on CBS, and then you watch an NFL game on CBS. Or you watch Fox NFL Sunday, and then you watch an NFL game on Fox. Now, there are some exceptions to the rule, as sometimes you'll see pregame shows that take place at 12 p.m. Eastern, and then the network won't show a game until 4 o'clock Eastern. However, when that happens, it's explicitly clear that this is happening. In other words, for the final 10 minutes of the pregame show, those that are getting a game at the 1 o'clock Eastern window go out to the game, and those that are not getting a game at that window will get some more banter in the studio that quite literally no one watches because they're flipping the channel to whatever game they want to see. But you're never really thrown for a loop. It's not like CBS takes you out to the Jets-Bills game and then decides not to show anything. Well, in week 7 of the 1987 season, there was an absolutely bizarre controversy involving one CBS station in Utah. And to say that there was massive outrage would be an understatement. You had the phone lines get flooded. You had the station manager trying to lead a revolt against the network in New York. You had just a giant mess all the way around that rubbed a lot of fans in the area the wrong way, which, let's be honest, was the last thing that the NFL needed immediately after the strike ended, the replacement games were over, and tensions between the fans and the league were at or near an all-time high. Because in 1987, CBS screwed up pretty badly, leaving a lot of people in Salt Lake City feeling awfully salty. And this is the story behind the broadcasting controversy. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand what just about everyone thought was going to happen, as well as how the NFL Today and its pregame show was structured back then. Today, with the NFL Today, no matter where you are in the country, and regardless of whether you have a game in the early window or a late window, it airs at 12 o'clock Eastern. If you have a 4 o'clock game, you'll never see the NFL Today airing at 3 o'clock. There's a very obvious reason for this. No one in their right mind is going to watch a pregame show to a game over an actual game. You're just wasting money and production costs. Advertisers won't pay for it, and the ratings would plummet. However, back in the 1980s, that wasn't the case, because back then, there were 2 completely separate versions of the show depending on what game you got. If you got a 1 o'clock Eastern game, then the NFL Today would air at 12:30. But if you got a 4 o'clock Eastern game, the show would come on at 3:30. And when the Colts were still in Baltimore, and games started at 2 o'clock there because of blue laws, the NFL Today would air at 1:30. Why that was the case, I'm not entirely sure. But I guess the idea behind it was to not leave anyone confused. If you saw Brett Musburger on your screen, you knew that you were going to be getting a game momentarily. Plus, you were more likely to see highlights of games and other action around the league from this show than you were from the actual game on the other network, as in-game updates were not commonplace. Remember that it wasn't until 1988 when NBC unveiled the 10-minute tracker, which changed the game completely for the better. And this meant that if you saw Musburger and company on your screen at 12:30 Eastern, that you were going to get a game shortly after. If you didn't, your network probably had a single header in the later window and not the earlier window. With that being said, this station right here is KSL TV. Today, it's an NBC affiliate, but back in 1987, it was a CBS affiliate, meaning that it held the rights to NFC games. It's the affiliate of the Salt Lake City region, and one of the larger TV markets in the country, ranking 30th. Salt Lake City is ranked higher than various NFL markets, including Kansas City, Cincinnati, Las Vegas, New Orleans, Buffalo, and Green Bay. In other words, this market was a big deal, and even though the ratings might not be that massive due to the religious makeup of the state, meaning that a lot of people aren't watching games on Sundays, you would still get a fair number of eyeballs watching the games. And when KSL aired the NFL Today at 10:30 Mountain Time, which was 12:30 Eastern Time, everyone was expecting that pregame show to be followed up with this game right here, especially since the show cut away to a feed at the Superdome. You had an absolutely big game in the NFC West, and one of the biggest games of the young season on paper so far, between the San Francisco 49ers and the New Orleans Saints. The 49ers entered this game as the leaders in the NFC West with a 4-1 record, and the Saints entered one game back at 3-2. I'm not going to dive into the statistics saying how good both of these teams were, because let's be honest, 60% of the games to get to that record were played with players who, for the most part, never played another down in the NFL, so no one really knew how good anyone was at this stage. However, both the Niners and the Saints would be in the playoffs if the season ended today. This game was for first place in the division at the 40% mark, so there was a lot on the line, as this might have been the marquee game of the entire week, in not just the conference, but in the National Football League. So you had a market eagerly anticipating the 49ers Saints game, and a market that was expecting forever to get the 49ers Saints game. In every prior week, the NFL Today was followed by a game, so no one thought that this would be any different. At 10:59 Mountain Time, KSL was in a commercial break, with the expectation being that at 11 o'clock, you would hear that intro music. You'd see that shot of the Superdome, you'd see Dick Stockton and Terry Bradshaw in the booth breaking down what was going to happen, and you would hear from your living room that Superdome crowd go wild after a month without, for all intents and purposes, the real NFL players. And at 11 o'clock Mountain Time, this is what KSL was showing.
Welcome to the Inn of the Sixth Happiness.
Huh. That's a really long commercial break. I know networks like to squeeze in commercials whenever they can, but that seems excessive. Still, I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Let's see if anything was different at 11:01.
Well, you are going to use me, aren't you? You are going to send me to China.
Oh wow, we're still going. How long is this commercial anyways? It's the same thing they were showing a minute ago. And why does this look like a trailer for a movie? Better yet, why does this look like a movie from the 1950s? Why are they showing an advertisement for a 50s movie? Are they re-releasing it or something? This seems like a bizarre choice. I don't know why you'd show a long commercial like this that seems to, in actuality, just be the first few minutes of a movie from the 1950s. Oh no. Oh no. Oh god, no. Don't even tell me. Oh boy. This is what I think it is, isn't it? Yep. This isn't a commercial. This isn't a tie-in to the game or anything like that. This is an actual movie from 1958 called The Inn of the Sixth Happiness, a movie about a missionary in the war in the late 1930s and early 1940s between China and Japan. And last time I checked, at no point during this movie does Joe Montana appear, nor does Jerry Rice appear, nor does the Dome Patrol appear, nor do any players on the 49ers or the Saints appear. So yep, everyone was fooled and faked out. And knowing football fans, what do you think they did? Do you think they accepted the outcome, realized that this was a classic piece of cinema, sat down and watched the movie, and shed tears at the conflicts that the main characters were going through? Or do you think they angrily lambasted KSL with a bunch of phone calls, asking them where the heck the 49ers Saints game was? I'm sure you can guess which one it was. They flooded the phone lines. And the lines got so flooded and got so many callers who were angry that it took until Monday night for KSL to call back everyone and let them know what happened and how sorry they were for the situation. That raises the question, how did something like this even happen? Who screwed up at KSL and made this idiotic broadcasting decision to show a movie right after promising the 49ers Saints game on the NFL Today? And as it turns out, in a crazy twist, this story actually doesn't involve an incompetent station manager who had no idea how to do his job. This isn't like the story on the CBS affiliate in Maine that aired the wrong game twice in a 2-week stretch, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. This isn't like the story on the affiliate in Detroit that just forgot to air a game entirely, which you can also learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Because by all accounts, KSL program director Dave Minukin hated this decision and wanted nothing to do with it. He knew that this was going to be a train wreck, but his hands were completely tied by CBS, who ordered KSL to show the NFL Today at 10:30, even though they were not showing a game at 11 o'clock, and would be showing the Cardinals-Giants game at 2 o'clock. This was a classic case of the men in New York having no pulse on the rest of the country, and having no idea what Utah residents wanted or were accustomed to. Because Mnuchin initially called New York and said, "We're not going to air the NFL Today in the early time slot if we don't have an early game, because that's stupid. That defeats the purpose of the show. And we've never done it where we show the NFL Today and didn't follow it up immediately with the broadcast of an actual game." The original plan, as you can tell by this TV guide, was to have paid programming and a weight loss show airing at 10:30, followed by the Inn of the Sixth Happiness airing at 11 o'clock. So the original plan was so that there would be no confusion whatsoever, that CBS wasn't going to show a game. And you can tell it's an original plan because it lists NBC as showing the Broncos-Vikings game in the early window, which did not happen, since that game got moved due to the Minnesota Twins needing the Metrodome that day for the World Series. That game got moved to Monday night. But then, New York demanded that Mnuchin and KSL relent and show the NFL Today at 10:30, even though Mnuchin knew that this was going to be a chaotic disaster. Sure enough, to the shock of no one, it was a chaotic disaster. And Mnuchin was so fed up with New York forcing KSL to do this that he essentially gave CBS an ultimatum. Do that again and force us to show the NFL Today in the early time slot if we don't have an early game, and we'll just stop showing the NFL Today entirely. As Mnuchin said, the NFL Today is designed as a game lead-in. If a game doesn't follow, our viewers become angry and confused. Sunday's mess proved that the experiment doesn't work in our time zone, and we want it changed. And at least from all accounts, the pressure was so much, and Mnuchin's argument was so convincing that New York honored KSL's wishes, and from that moment on, only had Utah get a CBS game in the early window, so that the NFL Today would actually serve as a lead-in program. KSL kept the NFL Today for the rest of the 1987 season, so it's safe to say that Mnuchin did not have to test out that ultimatum of his, which was definitely for the best. The bad news was that the Salt Lake residents missed a very good contest, as the 49ers won 24-22 after a game-winning fourth-quarter touchdown pass by Joe Montana to Mike Wilson and a missed field goal by Saints kicker Morton Anderson with no time left. But the good news was that they at least knew that they had a station manager who stood up for them and knew what they wanted. We've seen so many stories about incompetent station managers screwing it over for football fans across the region and ruining Sundays for a lot of people. So to see someone like this, who knew it was going to be a bad idea, spent 2 whole days personally calling people back when he did not have to, apologizing and explaining the situation, and who was willing to stand up to New York and demand a change for the betterment of his audience and his viewers, is quite remarkable. He served roles in KSL for a whopping 31 years, so it's clear that he was doing something right. But I think the number one rule and lesson from all of this is that as humans, we are creatures of habit, and if we always expect something to follow something else, and that doesn't happen, then we'll be confused and chaos will ensue. And CBS learned that lesson the hard way back in 1987 with this entire broadcasting fiasco. You don't want to deceive your viewing audience and play with their emotions and their expectations, especially when it comes to football Sundays. Because if you do that, as Utah residents learned on October 25th, 1987, the Inn of the Sixth Happiness becomes more like the Inn of the Sixth Sadness. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.